are on the rise across the city. It seems everywhere you look, there's something going wrong. With things running amok, companies are turning more and more towards project managers to save them. But a new breed of evil stakeholders has emerged. These stakeholders are focused on doing everything in their power to derail projects, and recently they've joined forces to form the League of Lamentable Stakeholders. Is all hope lost? Are we destined to continue to absorb the wrath of these party poopers? Fear not, project managers. There are heroes among us. The investigators at Project Pundits Agency are working day and night to identify such serially sucky stakeholders and mitigate their impacts and to dismantle the League of Lamentable Stakeholders. These are their stories.
So we're going to talk about the Whatabouter.
The Whatabouter.
As just giving you the context. The Whatabouter.
What about this? What about that? What about your neighbor's cat? This is the type of behavior many project managers have to deal with when they run into the Whatabouter. This Lamentable has the superpower to derail your conversations, and even your project. But the Project Pundits' private eyes have found out how to counteract those powers. Listen to find out how.
I was introduced to the Whatabouter for the first time. I'll say really understood the concept of a Whatabouter for the first time when I had been working for a certain corporation. We'll leave names out of it, for about 10 years. So I had been in this corporation for quite a while.
In the middle of a merger right now. But yeah.
Thank you. Awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. Now giving them more clues. I'm sure no one has any idea what company I'm talking about. While I was working for this company, I was working on we were a group of us, including you, were managing the delivery for a significant claims payment system, and the claims system had really two masters to it, right? There was the product group, and the product group was responsible for telling us, hey, in the market, the clients are asking for these features, right? They want the claim payment system to be able to do this, or sometimes providers might want it to be able to do that, whatever. So there was the product group who had product features. And then there was the other group, which was the operations group. They were the people that ran the system. And as the system had problems, as the system needed people to go in and intervene for things that didn't do well, there were operations piece of it. They had to deal with all of the issues and problems that the system had because they had to run it. They had the people that were running that system. My first experience with the Whatabouter was we would have these extended prioritization meetings where we decided what features are going in to the next set of delivery that we're doing. And as you may recall, Jim, we're talking about millions of dollars. We're not talking about small amounts. I just want to paint a picture for the broader group. We're not talking about enhancements that were $1,000 that were, an hour or two of a person's time. This was millions of dollars that we were spending in this delivery work. And I was introduced to the Whatabouter when we started in these prioritization discussions, and we would be talking about a given feature to say, okay, we're going to do this. And the Whatabouter was from the operations group and would say, well, what happens when this scenario happens? And the scenario that they described sounded to me, not being knowledgeable, like a very, very remote possibility. And I get it that we're talking about millions of claims a day, so maybe something very remote happens very frequently. So I would ask sometimes and say, well, how often does that happen? And they would say, oh, more often than you think. More often than you think. And so in the end, we ended up, the Whatabouter, as they said, well, what about this scenario or what about that scenario? We would go down these rat holes where we would spend hours and hours discussing these crazy, almost never happening scenarios. And it not only did it take up a lot of our project's time, but it took tons and tons of the money that could have been spent in what I would have considered much more important priorities. And they say, no, we're going to solve this tiny little problem that, what about this? What about that? And we're solving all of these microscopic scenarios that almost never, ever happen. Do you remember? I mean, I'm sure I'd say there's more than one actual physical character that was the Whatabouter in that particular team. But I'll say what I learned two things from that experience. First of all, I learned their weaknesses. Jim, the Whatabouter's
What are
weakness,
their weaknesses?
The Whatabouter's weakness that I discovered was data, fact-based conversation. So the Whatabouters live in anecdotes.
Yep.
They not all operations people do. In fact, operations people often can be very data-driven. But the Whatabouter specifically, someone who says, hey, well, have we thought about this scenario? Have we thought about that scenario? They're not living in data. They just know that they get complaints from their operations people that say, this happens sometimes and it's really annoying for me to do, right? What I found when we did this is I would say, okay, I get it. And I'd pull out my kryptonite, right? Which is things like, how often does that happen, right? They say, oh, more often than you think, right? When they say the more often you think, I'd say, okay, why don't you just send me an actual data dump of the number of instances that it happens. Number one, right, is give me hard data of when it happens. And then the other sort of kryptonite to the Whatabouter is fact-based conversations between solving that problem and the return on investment that you get by solving that problem. So case in point, if let's say that it happens even more frequently, but it only takes someone 5 minutes to go in and manually intervene. There were many things that we were solving that never amortized out in terms of trying to automate that problem, meaning the money that we'd have to spend, let's say that we'd have to spend $1 million to automate a solution for that problem. They could have in perpetuity just had a dedicated human being doing nothing but solving that problem manually, and they would have saved money instead of us automating it. But the Whatabouter never wants anything to be touched by a human being. It's got to be entirely end-to-end manual, even if it's much cheaper to just hire a person to do it. That was my experience with the Whatabouter.
Well, I think I've had many experiences with such people, and I will say there's some overlapping characteristics between some of our Lamentables, for sure. But in regard to the Whatabouter, there's a certain pathology sometimes to these folks as well. And I think that pathology is they get a dopamine boost out of knowing where these little bodies are buried, and they're like ahas, like, and so they get attention in a meeting, they get to go down a path, they get to demonstrate how well they know a process, because let's face it, a lot of these processes have been around for, like I said, 30-40 years, and they're not documented, they're not written down, but it's in this person's head. And so I think it's sometimes a bit power trippy.
Jim, that's a great observation. I think that in some cases, not always. Now, I'll also say there's those who say I want to show my knowledge off right now by doing a what about. There are also those though that I think are less interested in that than just I don't want my people complaining about this one thing that they do all the time. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I think it does happen both, but that's a great observation how you're right that lots of people kind of, I think, maybe do get a little power trip in flaunting that knowledge.
Yeah, and I think you get and this crosses over to some of the other roles we'll get to it in some future show, but I think they share characteristics with one of the other Lamentables where, it's the what about regulatory or other sorts of things that you're not going to meet the regulatory thing. And it's very much what Braden said. It's like, Yeah, right. So we're going to violate the regulation. What is the penalty for breaking that regulation? Well, it's $200 per incident. And how many of these do we have a year? Like 20. Okay, I'm going to 20 times 200. Yeah. And it's going to cost us $600,000 to fix this. Like, we'll just pay the fines, right? But
math.
It's math. Math is another
Whatabouters don't like math. They don't like math, data, or fact-based conversations. No.
So I think Braden, you got to get into it. Like, how you talked about dealing with data sometimes, but here, what I'll say is a lot of us got into project management originally. And then ultimately for me getting into consulting, it's just, to me, and we'll get into that another time, it's an evolution of problem solving. Right. And I think we like problem solving. So I've gotten caught because what the Whatabouter says is interesting. And it's like, oh yeah, that's a sneaky little problem. I would love to try to solve that. And I find out like 2 hours later in a whiteboard, I'm like, what? What am I doing?
You have been hypnotized.
Right,
It's like the snake from Jungle Book who has those eyes that like flutter. You're like, hey, I solve problems and this person has one for me. Yes, let's do it. And all of a sudden, you're right. You're down a rat hole. What just happened?
Right. It's like waking up with like candy wrappers all over the floor, passed out on the carpet. Like, it's just what happened. I don't remember how I got here. So
you're right. No, that is another danger of the Whatabouter. Not just derailing in terms of trying to prioritize things that maybe aren't the highest priority from return on investment, but they can give you interesting problems to solve. That's a good point.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, I don't know what the danger index is. What did we have the danger index?
I have the danger index. It depends, right? Generally, I say as a general danger index, somewhere between 7 to 8 on a scale of 1 to 10, right? But if they're well connected, if they have the ear of the operational executive team, if the executive team is really listening to them and they're making a big stink about something small, they can be more dangerous. If they're not well connected, if they're not close to their operational leadership team because they're making too big of a stink about things that aren't important, which a lot of folks do, then they're less dangerous because people aren't really paying. They're crying wolf too many times, right? So if they've cried wolf too many times and their leadership they don't have the leadership's ear, they're a little bit less dangerous. If they're well connected and maybe making a stink about a specific issue, then sometimes you might just have to say, hey, that sounds great. Let's solve this. I think it's ridiculous and we're pouring money, down the drain by doing it. But sometimes maybe you have to give something in order to get something, and that can work sometimes with the Whatabouters. Don't give them everything, but give them something.
And sometimes I've gone to the extreme of removing them from having a voice on the project, right? So in the RACI matrix, they go from an R to a
informed.
R. They go from an R to a C, ultimately to an I.
Can't always do that, right? I mean, there are plenty of times where as a project manager,
you don't have those.
Your input's coming from the operations team, sure.
So I think watch out for the Whatabouter, he or she. And again, I'll say characteristically, you'll find that there have been people who've been in an organization for an extended period. Usually, it doesn't have to be, but usually it's people who've have been around for a while. So, yeah. I am going to talk about one of my favorite candidates for the League of Lamentable Stakeholders. In fact, this is probably one of my top 3.
While continuing their investigations, the fine upstanding detectives of the Project Pundits Agency were thrust into checking out another loathsome anti-hero. Of all the Lamentables they've run across to date, this was so far their most dangerous investigation. Find out why as they discuss the MBA.
When I say the MBA, I mean a person with a degree of an MBA or a Master's of Business Administration.
Or equivalent, right? It doesn't have to just be an MBA. It could be other masters
Yeah,
have them go get
I guess
doctorate degrees.
I think there's some variance between them, but particularly the MBAs. I mean, I want to separate them because there's a couple of PhDs I wanted to punch in the face as well, like. But the MBAs in particular, and I'll say I'm gonna narrow it down because Braden, you don't have an MBA, you have a legal degree, so you're another special kind of advanced degree person, right? Do you have an MBA too?
Are you? I think Jim's trying to soften this for me because he knows that I have degrees. It's okay, Jim. You can call me the MBA if you want to.
A couple of my best friends have MBAs, but they don't fall. Let me further narrow this.
Are they
down
also? Sorry,
they're not. No.
Okay,
That's an astrophysicist who doesn't wear shoes on stage and charges $238 a ticket. So, the MBA, I am talking primarily about the Harvards of the world, the Stanfords, these Ivy League schools where people go to school. They get their undergrad degree from somewhere, and then they immediately, or with a very small internship, go immediately into grad school, and their heads are filled with just giant amounts of stuff, and they come out into the world, and here's the thing with the MBAs, they don't come out at the first rung of the corporate ladder or the second rung or the third rung. These people come out because of their degree, and they come in at the lowest I've seen, maybe a manager, but for the most part they come in at a director level, and they're the worst for projects, for companies, and for everything.
Jim, real quick, can I just clarify, because I think, and I'm pretty sure what you're talking about is specifically not someone who has gained a lot of experience in the professional world and then gone on to get a secondary degree to further their education. You're talking about someone who, fresh from undergraduate straight into an advanced degree and then into the corporate world, and gets hired into a position somewhere past middle management, where they have zero practical experience. Go ahead. Yeah.
That's not exactly true. Sometimes these folks will take a year to go backpacking through Europe before they start grad school. So it's not exactly undergrad straight into grad
forgot.
School.
They do have some practical experience.
Real world. That's what they call real world experience, right? They've, visited a few hostels. Oh, sorry. They don't stay in hostels usually either, but.
I sent Jim a clip of a person who was ranting about how they can't get a job because of a lack of experience, and then go on this rant about how the degree is my experience.
People say, get your degree, but then they don't talk about how you need experience. The degree was the experience!
Oh, I was dying. I love that one. It was great.
So I've run into, again, a number of my really good friends have MBAs, like best friends.
He's just insulted all of you, by the way. If you have MBA next to your name, he's talking about you.
Yeah, I'm talking about the people who, oh man, I'm going to get myself canceled. I'm talking about the people who put MBA after their name on everything too. It's just signs to me. So anyways, the whole point about this Lamentable, when they get into these roles, so they'll start off good, right? So they're very good. So some of the characters are extremely good at communicating. They typically will dress really well. Like, I'm totally jealous of how they dress. The guys will wear those pants that are a little high so you can see their colored socks. They'll have a good watch on. They smell good. Their hair is done really well. Same with the women. The women are, so they present very well.
Way too much attention to this stuff, Jim. I'm just.
These are characters. I'm a pattern recognizer.
Fair enough.
On
your detective quest. I get it. So I understand.
They have these douchey smiles, which if you don't recognize them, but they're very confident, right? But that confidence borders on arrogance, or is arrogant. And so I think they come in hot, right? They're like, I got this. I'll solve this. So-and-so's uncle, hired me here because I know we both graduated Harvard and I got this. and I'm gonna take this project, and we're gonna make $2 million the first year. And they get in, and then they realize that in projects, nothing is black and white. Not a single thing, not one single thing is black and white. I can't admit that I don't have the answers. This is the other thing with the MBAs. It takes them a while to get humble to know that, hey, maybe I don't have the answers. Whereas I pretty much go in and like, I'll make assumption, and I will, like, maybe ex-girlfriends will disagree, but I will admit when I'm wrong, like, or I don't know something at this point, just because, like, I know what I don't know.
If all of Jim's ex-girlfriends wouldn't mind leaving in the comments just whether or not that is in fact actually true, I'd love to see that. Or you can email me. My email contact information's in the pod. Go ahead, sorry, Jim.
But we're not talking about me. We're talking about MBA. So the MBA. So the problem is when they get to the point on projects where they have something they don't know how to solve, they'll end up working. They work very hard. Like they'll work 70, 80 hours a week and everything else. But it's not good work. It's kind of just spinning, and they won't ask for help. And then they in many cases are very hard on the people who work for them, and have these high expectations that those people work at the level they are working at. And it's really, really tough. So they're one of my leading Lamentables. These guys and gals, they get, again, hired because of their pedigree. And don't get me wrong, these schools do churn out some amazing talent and, world leaders and everything else. But it's not, going to a school doesn't equate to being able to do things. And on a project, you have to be adaptable and learn. And again, we've talked about this before, but experience trumps any sort of academic learnings, right? So, so how do you recognize an MBA other than the fact that they'll tell you, or they're wearing a ring from their school, or they meet one of those sets,
or it's in their email signature, or 5 other places,
on
their wall,
right. They tend to to minimize dissent. They tend to name drop quite a bit. So, it's who they know, and they can get problems solved based upon who they know. So a lot of times they'll say, oh, I was on the yacht last weekend with so-and-so's, son who's over here. I could just make a call. And I'll tell you, and there's some ways I'm jealous of the networks folks come out with, but it doesn't solve everything. So you'll know that. So they're again, their explanations of how to solve things are they're woven with a lot of academic, like, case studies. Well, like in 1997, Merck tried to do this with this drug, and when they did that, this was the outcome. So, there's some lessons to be learned there.
Have you ever given like a live interview to someone where you're interviewing a candidate for a job, and instead of saying, tell me the typical behavioral questions, right? Tell me how you would, blah, 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 blah. It's, do critical thinking for me in front of me. And I love those types of questions, right? So I might say, here's a case pattern that we might have to put a project plan together for. Write an outline of a project plan for me right now in front of my face. Go. And if you don't know anything about what that topic is, that's okay. You would say, hey, in my plan, I'm going to get smart about whatever this topic is and blah, 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 right? Show me critical thinking. My experience with MBAs, if their kryptonite is having them use experience where they don't have any, right? It's draw on experience in order to solve practical world problems. Where MBAs, and I know your disdain for all things academic, I don't necessarily
share. I do not
share.
have a disdain. I'm going to have a disclaimer episode that goes in front of all of our episodes, to be clear.
Jim hating all academics, but here, what I think, the typical characteristics, it's less all MBAs than it is MBAs that come with a chip on their shoulder, right? Who say, hey, I've got a pedigree that I'm substituting for real world experience. And so their kryptonite is when you say, okay, well, tell me how you've done this in the past, right? Show me the experience that you have, and then they either have two choices to make something up, to say, well, I learned about it in a book, or they can say, you know what, I haven't really done this, and then you say, okay, well, hey, why don't maybe you can be a little more open to some suggestions that the team members have, because even though they don't have the pedigree, some of your team members have a lot more experience than you do. And
I've done that. It doesn't go over well.
When you challenge them, well, you're not gonna make someone who has a chip on their shoulder necessarily humble, shy of them having bad experience. The way that I've seen most, actually, maybe that's their kryptonite right there, is real world experience, which they have little of, teaches them through bad results, right? That's their kryptonite, is bad results. When they get these terrible things happen to them as a result, because they don't have experience, they say, oh gosh, maybe my degree doesn't solve every problem that I have. And
well, I mean, ultimately, hopefully somebody beats the arrogance out of them, right? I mean, I think that's the only.
We're back to violence. Jim is just having a violent day.
So, Braden, I'm going to disagree with you on this.
Something.
Here's the thing. So if you're a project manager, for the most part, these people aren't going to be reporting to you. If they do,
does the hat make you into a mob member? I'm just trying to understand, like, what?
No, I'm just a regular, just like you on this show. We're here to detect and all of that. So just a couple of regular. So isn't that what they were called in the 50s? I don't know.
How about
private? Private,
yeah,
right? Isn't it?
No, yeah.
Wasn't it?
Just go ahead, Jim.
Am I
Keep
wrong?
Going. There's so much censoring going on right now. I feel bad. Richie's had to already bleep you out 5 times. Go ahead. Yes, Jim, you're right.
I thought that was what it was called, but anyways.
Go ahead, Slugger.
So the MBAs, the problem is they're usually in charge of you as a project manager or even a program manager. That's been my experience. So the problem is, how do you mitigate that? I mean, as with anything, continue to make broad relationships with everybody. The problem is those people have usually gotten into those roles. Somebody made a decision to put them in that role. So the person who put them into the role is going to be overly anxious to admit they made a mistake. So if that senior leader, if you could have a conversation with them, maybe they could help coach that, right? And minimize that, right? This is why the danger index, for me on this person could be up. And I think Braden weighted heavy on the danger index. It's like, I don't know if you watch Dave Portnoy reviewing pizzas, he's given out 1-9 score, and Braden started hot.
Yeah, you got to take one bite and score it.
Rate the pizza.
0 through 10.
I give it a 9.
9, that's a rookie score. Who else? What do you got?
So he started pretty high. I started low, so that the 9s would be like, oh my God, he's gonna stab your mother type of thing. Lamentable, but
again with the stabbing. Jim, I got to get him out of this fedora.
But the thing with generally with MBAs is they're very well typically connected one way or another. I mean, you don't just fall into these type of roles through apply. They don't go on LinkedIn and apply to a director role, get an interview, and get the job. It's usually through people they know. So it's really tough. So I think maybe one of the other pieces of kryptonite is find a way of showing that your successes are their successes, and and show that you're of value to them and you're making them look good. It's hard to do when you feel like they're contravening or contradicting what you're trying to do. But your ultimate job is to deliver your project on time, on budget, within scope, of quality, all of that. So, do what you can. But again,
I'd say if you're in a reporting relationship with this person and they're a train wreck, they're heading down a really bad path. Yeah. Your other option is to get off the train.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Is to go find another spot, because sometimes you're right. Oftentimes you're dealing with MBAs in an external and a matrix relationship. They're easier to deal with that way. If you're talking about a reporting relationship, that's tricky. And you're right that either you align and just say, hey, my successes are your successes. I'm going to show you what we can do together. Good approach. Or if the person is just gonna go down a crazy train, you jump off and get off at the next station, or jump off while it's running.
So be cautious. Again, I want to leave everybody with the understanding that I do not have a general disdain for MBAs in general. Again, some of my best. I sound like those people who are trying to say they're not racist by saying they have another race as a friend. I'm like, a lot of my friends are MBAs. I don't hate all MBAs. Like,
Jim, let's see how many people you can offend in one episode. I'll bet you could really go for. I'm proud of you. Good job. Can I talk about the punching bag? Or are we good?
Let's move on to a non-controversial another lamentable.
Let me take the next one.
Can you feel bad for a lamentable? The sleuths of the Project Pundits agency try to answer the question when they discuss a semi-villain that no one talks about, and often does not even think about. The punching bag. You would be wise to not take them lightly. Find out why.
The punching bag is an interesting lamentable. Of all of the Lamentables, I would say the punching bag is the least direct threat to you. The punching bag is more of an entertainment character, or maybe a character of pathos, in that you feel for these people. So I recall, and in almost every organization that I've been in, there is a punching bag, and I've been surprised that this character exists in almost every pantheon of project management. The punching bag is characterized by a person who, for whatever reason, and I don't know all of the psychological drivers for which it happens, is on the receiving end of all of the ire of every leader at every meeting. Now, that's an exaggeration, but they, for whatever reason, have been selected. And sometimes, and I tried to generalize as I was thinking about this role, what I thought originated, and my generalizations, these are generalizations, are that they're often not perfectly competent, but not so incompetent that they would lose their job, right? If they were terribly incompetent, they'd be kicked out, they'd be replaced. So these aren't incompetent people, but they're sometimes a little bit careless or sloppy with what they're doing, and maybe over time, execs have just gotten annoyed with them, and it's just this perpetual annoyance because they are on the receiving end of every grilling, of every joke. Like the execs and leaders are just relentless with these folks, and you know, I remember the first time that I experienced a punching bag. My very first boss, we were on these conference calls, and we'd be on these long conference calls together in his office. There were 3 of us, and he would put us on mute, and he would just go on these rants about this person. And he wasn't the only one. Like groups of people were just hammering this one poor person who was in some infrastructure group. And then he would come back off mute, and we would listen and interject comments. The hard part was my boss wasn't very careful about the mute button. And so on more than one occasion, we would be off mute, and that person and my boss would say, "That person couldn't manage their way out of a paper bag," and literally go off on a rant, off of mute, on a conference call with probably 100 people. And then someone would just say, I'll call him John. "John, you're not on mute." And he would invariably say, "Sorry." He would mute himself. Oh my goodness.
Just as a side note, folks, just one thing I learned, and this came from an organization that Braden and I both shared, is the concept of the double mute. And so this came out of I don't know if you remember, a Super Bowl ad.
Color's good, presentation's good. I'm shocked.
Glad you like it, sir. You are shocked? Really? Because we're shocked. Shocked you even get it, pal. Dave, what are you doing here?
Came to fix the mute button.
Bye-bye bonus.
After that, I was paranoid, and everybody's paranoid, that like the mute button was broken. So, I think it's, if I remember, it's still *6. On most conference lines to mute. That's one mute, and then you have the actual mute on whatever device you use. And so consider the double mute.
That's a PSA from our own
right.
Jim. I don't. So this would have been before probably the double mute even existed, because I just died.
Right.
I mean, actually, I say laughing.
Shame on you.
I wasn't laughing. No, I wasn't.
Joining
I was
in the kick circle for the punching bag.
I was embarrassed, is what I was, more than anything else. Here he had just insulted someone, and what's kind of surprised me was after he had said sorry and he muted himself, he would just repeat what he said to us inside the room. He just muted. It was unfortunate because honestly, if I were to say, hey, how do you deal with a punching bag, right? There's two things. Number one is there is some danger from the punching bag, not necessarily a direct threat from the punching bag themselves, but you don't want to be collateral damage.
Oh, are you going with the this is the guys who bring in guns to work and kill their coworkers?
Well, no. Boy, Jim, like seriously, I'm not kidding. I
thought that's where you're going.
he has now, like, I think he's referenced serial killing, murder, stab, like 5-6 references. I don't know what's going on here. We're going to have to keep Jim in check. No, collateral damage meaning, let's say the exec gives this guy a punching and a grill and he gets all fired up and then he says, all right, well, we'll deal with that later. Who's next on the agenda, right? You don't want to be that next person necessarily, because you potentially earned, collateral damage from the leaders of the execs in the room. The other thing, though, I would say is for the punching bag is, at least give them a kind word, right? They're the scapegoat for everything out there. A smile across the table, don't let other leaders see you giving them a smile lest you be shunned along with. But I felt bad for the punching bags, both the first time that I saw them and throughout as I've seen them. I don't know how many friends they have in the organization. Go ahead, Jim.
That is one version of the punching bag. I need to give a very specific variance that I've seen now. So it's a senior executive, usually a C-suite person, and they hire someone who is the equivalent of their chief of staff. So basically it's the person who does their work for them, right? And so they have on one hand, they have a tremendous amount of power because they folks know they're attached at the hip to a C-suite person, right? I'm reminded of who's that dude on The Simpsons, Mr. Burns' assistant there. That's who I picture.
Wait, Smithers?
Smithers, right.
Smithers? What's the meaning of this slacking off?
There's a bee in my eye, sir.
And?
Perhaps you could paddle for just a little while, sir.
Quite impossible.
Like, sometimes some of these people are a little portly, and there was nonstop jokes about just weird jokes about losing weight or rolling in or what, and this person is just they go along with it because it's like being in the club versus you're in the club of the senior leaders, but dude, you're getting disrespected but they inevitably do have the conversations with the senior leaders. So you do want to make them they're very dangerous from the perspective of you want to be on their good side because they wield in those instances I'm talking about a tremendous amount of power because of their closeness to power, right? But the amount of abuse they take in these roles is in some of the behavior by these senior executives is off the charts. So I think so that's just my variance on that. Take them out to lunch, and by the way, these people and it's a double-edged sword about their closeness to power. They can be very influential from a project perspective in helping you get things through, right? It's through back channels and everything. So, befriend them not only because they get abused, but also because, they're a good person to have on your side. That's why this lamentable, if you want to call it, they're lamentable adjacent. I think we've used these terms
lamentable adjacent.
Yeah, right. But it is a character that's out there, and you need to be careful. I think danger index wise, where did you land? A little lower, much lower, right? Generally,
much lower.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say kind of in the 2-3 category generally is where we had these guys.
So not as dangerous, I would say, as the Naysayer. If you so the Naysayer, I think again there's a lot of commonality among these, I think.
The Project Pundits detectives have run across a wide variety of characters throughout their long and extremely illustrious careers. In the subset of characters, a few select troublemakers stick out. The Naysayer is one of them. This particular lamentable troublemaker has brought many project managers to the brink of insanity. So buckle in and listen carefully if you don't want to be overmatched when you run into a Naysayer.
I think the Whatabouter and the Naysayer are close in some instances, right? But the Naysayer is just like, yeah. I mean, Naysayer's like arms folded, just like, you know. And again, I was getting some of the aliases down, and when I'm looking at the aliases, they're all like Debbie Downer, Debbie Doubter, Negative Nancy, Karens, and I'm like, oh, that's that. Like those are all female like attributed like names. I didn't even as I laid them out. So this is not a female thing, but these are just general terms to get to that.
Definitely.
Yeah. And it's just a character, and again, they could be extremely dangerous, but they go out of their way to find the negative to whatever it is that you're doing or saying or presenting. If you're presenting a status or you're presenting that, it's always the negative bent on there. And then, there's an element of the Naysayer who will, any approach that you're going to take, they're going to want to punch holes in it, and they're going to want to say no.
No!
No.
No!
No.
No! No! No, 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 no!
No.
No! No!
No.
No!
No.
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 No! No!
No.
No! No! No!
No.
No.
It can very quickly, depending on their role in the organization or the role in your project, it can take everything off track. Similar, and this is where I was getting similar to Whatabouter. You could before you know it, you're off like discussing something useless when they can take you off point so easily and taint your messages and whatnot. Say it's just like their common phrases. No, it'll never work. This will never work. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. We shouldn't do this. We did this we've tried this before and it didn't work.
We've tried this before is a really common one, right? Yeah. Oh, we've tried this 5 times. It's never worked.
Yep. And again, if we're trying to take the positive bias of it's probably become from their experience, right? I mean, again, these folks have scars, right? They're emotionally scarred.
A practical person to an NBA, everyone's a Naysayer, right? They're like, what do you mean this is going to work? Of course it's going to work. Oh, your experience.
Yep.
Right? No, give me a break. Just follow me and it's going to work out. So I'm sure we look like naysayers to an NBA, right?
Right, exactly. And then, and they're always going to want to go down and, get more information, delaying, looking for more, get more and whatnot. And then, I found a lot of the naysayers have some very specific physical characteristics that are there. I mean, we had the huffing and the puffing and the lowered shoulders and the eye roll, like overt eye rolling, and the head shake. It's the just shake like no. I'm not sure what violent attribute I can talk to about this person since I covered violence and all the others.
You always have to have.
I have one.
Yeah.
I have one. So I think their primary weapons, right? So I think this is on the screen here, right? Is they have a machine gun magazine, like filled with decades of failed experiences to draw and fire away on command, right? So it's just like here's why this won't work, right? So there you go. There's your violent.
We need, for this episode, we need to do a montage of all of the violence that you've mentioned, because it's going to be like a minute long. Fun stuff.
And I think you got to be careful, because I think the naysayer a lot of times will be quiet for like 3/4 of a meeting, and just at the worst possible time, they time their like naysaying their nose right like when you're about to like give your peak climax of your like story, and they're like, well, no, and they're like, dude, really? Just like, they're very good at the timing. And again, I think part of it is an attention gathering.
It can also, Jim, I was going to say the time, you're absolutely right about the timing, and they always time it perfectly. It could be at the climax. I've also seen it where it can be right at the beginning. You haven't even started. They're like, hey, before we actually get to the agenda, can I just tell you the 30 ways that this is stupid?
Right, because I've read the deck. I've read the presentation ahead. Right. And I'm like,
Or that's one. The other that I've seen too is, you're literally about to hang up. Thanks everyone for participating. You're doing wrap up, right? You're 3 seconds from saying goodbye, everyone, and whoever it is, John Downer says, hey, just FYI, guys, before we all jump off, just want to make sure everyone knew that, blah, and drops like a nuclear bomb and says, oh, I apologize. And they do this too. I apologize. I have to run for a meeting. So they throw the grenade.
Yep.
And then
there's your violence.
And then they leave.
Yep.
I threw one out for you.
Yep.
They toss the bomb and then they dash. Oh, sorry, I got to go. See ya. That's literally happened to me, I'm sure, to lots of people, dozens of times, where it's the last 30 seconds. Here's a bomb and I've got to go.
Well, I mean, this may end up being, and I didn't have this in our Lamentables, but it just reminded me of, and I didn't invent this term at all. This was one of my mentors actually referred to a lamentable stakeholder. He does have an MBA, but he was experienced. So there was this particular executive on this engagement that we had, and she was all about her political growth. But when you have responsibilities over a set of work and everything else, and you're not there, except he called her the swoop and pooper. So she'd swoop and poop, and that's a good lamentable. But it reminds me of that, where it's like, you come in, you drop a bomb, and then you're like, and then it's just like the last
Bungee
minute.
Boss, I've heard it too. Bungee Boss, yeah.
Oh, really? That's interesting. That one's cool too.
Same idea, right? Where you sort of come in, give a whole bunch of feedback that everyone's like, well, wait, what? I need more. Shoot, and then you're gone, right?
Right,
Bungee
gone.
Boss. Bungee Boss.
I think so. So I think from a how do you combat this? Again, very similar techniques. The kryptonite is similar to a Whatabouter on a couple aspects. Use data. So when someone is presenting no, then say, okay, what do you recommend? What is your solution? Then if you're going to say no, and put them on the spot. And a lot of times they'll say, I don't know. All I know is it's going to work. And they say, well, I appreciate you pointing it out, but that is, at this point, it's not, and you're going to have to develop the techniques and different things like this. But again, data and drilling on questions and things like that. And then minimizing their voice in situations if it's a recurring thing, right? And this is usually chronic, right? These are well-known, like everybody knows who the naysayer is, and they're all cringing about having them in a meeting. So you got to manage that.
Jim, can I just say, so you're right. I think minimizing the voice, and I think you actually tied the two together. So asking them what they would do sometimes has been an effective way of having them be at least a little quieter. Number one, because I think you appeal to them to say, hey, I want to hear your opinion.
That's right.
And oftentimes I think the naysayers are about wanting to be heard. And when you say, hey, okay, I don't have all the answers, going back to the MBA, right? I don't have the answers. Naysayer, obviously you're saying no because you have experience. If we're taking the wrong approach, give me some suggestions. I'm open to it. Help me understand what we can do. And then one of two things happen, right? Either they say, I've been heard, but I don't have any good ideas. And sometimes that helps, where they're just like, I'm not sure. But then maybe they're not as vociferous because they've been heard. They know they're included. They know their opinion's welcome. And once you've satiated that need, some of the naysayers will just say, I don't need to continue to shoot at this. But sometimes
I will
maybe
say
they actually
people.
will have
So
ideas.
so let's connect some more. So sometimes, to your point, I think people have become naysayers because they've been managed by MBAs, right? And so people aren't listening to them, and so they've just gotten
you
bitter.
give them a voice, and
right?
your naysayer suddenly becomes your solution architect. I love it.
So I want to basically just leave people one of the lessons I learned. As much as I despise the organization that Braden and I worked for the psychological harm that was imparted on me during that time in my life, I will say that there was some lessons that have come out of there. One of the things that they used to just like pluck, and at the time it's just like just those HR things that are just like. All right, everybody, before we begin, I just want to go over a new concept. I think, it's been a little bit tough environment lately. So I want everybody to, when you're speaking to somebody else and they send you a message, I want you to first assume positive intent. And at the time, I wanted to strangle the person. Again, another violent reference. I'm like, this is not what I want to hear right now. I want to hear you're going to take care of the root cause of the problems. But I will tell you, in hindsight and through years of therapy and other things, that the concept of always starting with assuming positive intent with the naysayers or the whatabouters or anything else is a good place to start, even though you may still end up in the place where they're intending to do negative things. If you assume positive intent, you often get to a better place.
I think even when you can't assume positive intent, someone comes and is shooting both barrels at you, and they're clearly negative intent. I think even then, you can still say, "Hey, I need to contextualize what this person is doing," right? And whether it's a conversation directly and just maybe offline, right? But you say, "Hey, I could tell you felt really strongly about what we were talking about. Do you have some time that you can share me some context?" You can quickly go from having someone in the League of Lamentables to coming to the justice. I don't know what we haven't. Who
we haven't been the positive side of this yet. But
we need to think of the other side. But you can often come onto the other side just by taking some time to talking about being raised by an MBA. Yeah. Some of these folks' backstories, boy, we got the comic thing going. Some of these folks' backstories could really come from being traumatized by having really bad managers, bad mentors, folks who aren't listening, aren't hearing them. And maybe the first time that you go out and you say, "Gosh, I'd like to hear you," it transforms. I mean, how many? I've had lots of people where I've got them on my side and working with me as opposed to against me, just by a simple conversation saying, "I actually do care about your opinion," and listening to them. Yeah.
And listening, and I think I'm thinking of something else. So I was at this place where I saw Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson in a show, and I have my opinions on this fine gentleman. But at that place where Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson was speaking, there's actually one of those. Oh, what is it called? It's one of those. It's an entertainment. No, it's a room. Like it's a room, and you can just go in and break stuff with like a baseball bat. You ever see that? So they put TVs and everything. It's where you could just go nuts and break stuff. You've never seen these?
Jim,
they're all over the place.
You need to go to one.
I don't have violence. There is no violence in my soul.
Okay, good.
But
that's
for
great.
the punching bag and the naysayer and the whatabouter, if what's behind there, and I've taken teams out for paintball, and that's that could get dangerous. Fun. That's another outlet, right? Shoot your coworkers, but with a paintball. But the what's the place? It's a place where you go and you basically pay a bunch of money and you can go and smash
the
things.
Smash forum, smash room, whatever we call it. Sure.
But yeah, so I think though we point out. I think we're purposely being extreme our characterizations of these folks.
And overgeneralizing like crazy.
Overgeneralizing.
Right? Hopefully folks understand we're overgeneralizing on purpose.
On purpose to try to make this humorous. But, you're going to run into some version, some flavor of these folks. And honestly, we decided to do it this way to be a little cute with it. But these, this danger index is a real thing. If you don't manage to that, they're going to have potentially seriously negative consequences to your project. Sometimes you won't even see it coming, and there's other things we're trying to point out. So I want to
Jim real quick. The only other thing before you wrap up is just I also want to make sure folks understand each of you can be on the Lamentable League yourselves. Each of you, I have probably filled some of these roles, not the MBA yet, but there are roles that I've filled, even unintentionally, right? But maybe from my experience in a meeting, I might say in a way that I didn't intend to because I wasn't mindful, have shot down someone's great idea. And to me, I'm just like, oh, thank goodness I helped that person avoid this pitfall. And to them, they're like, and there's your naysayer right there who just like blew up my whole meeting, right? If you're aware when you are filling the role of a lamentable, there are ways that you can show people that you're not trying to be in opposition to them. And you can share messages. You can fill those roles in a way that you don't have to be in the league. You can still be a stakeholder, just not in the Lamentable League. You can do it in a way that's positive, especially in most of these, in a less public forum. That's all of these.
Yeah, that's what
all of these are mostly about public forum versus non-public forum.
Right. Although we have some future characteristics like our Lamentables, like the mob boss, who are happy pulling you into a back room and doing some.
I want you to wear you're going to wear that hat for the mob boss because that's going to be you. Okay. Jim, anything else you were
doing?
Yeah, no,
I think just in wrapping, would love your opinions on. So I think this is, depending on if we get canceled or not after this episode, this may be a series where we're going to introduce future Lamentables.
Could happen.
Yeah, Braden can't turn to a second camera since it exploded on the last episode.
Kind of did, actually. It didn't cause a fire, but it was scary.
Unfortunately not. Because that would have been... As long as nobody got
now,
hurt.
arson. We did need to finish it off with arson. Thank you, Jim, for completing the
violence circle.
That's awesome.
The circle of violence.
Awesome. Finish up with arson.
Do you guys agree with these with these Lamentables, these stereotypes, as that's what they are? Are there others that you see? We'd love to hear your comments, because this is a fun one. I think when you're in the trenches on a daily basis and you've done this long enough, you start to see a pattern of different types of folks you run into, and part of the reason I'm talking about this is it's cathartic, at least for us. Hopefully it's for you. And again, this is not meant to be serious, other than Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson pieces, which is a whole separate thing. But anyways,
back to Neil Tyson. You were frozen on this guy. This whole
he doesn't believe in aliens. Discussion. I mean, how can you?
Hey, I can agree with you there. That's a tough stance. I don't agree with that one.
But anyway, so that's it on this episode. Again, hope you enjoyed it. It's a little bit of a deviation from our standard. And Braden was wearing a suit, so give him props for that.
Dun 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 dun.
There you go.
No. And you're wearing a fedora.
I'm wearing a fedora.
Detective Quest.
Couple of again, I don't know why it's private, right? And that's what we are, investigating.
On that note.